Hey guys, Brandon Kuelis here, Director of the Salt Lake Community College Concurrent Enrollment Program, and today in this episode we're going to be talking about the process for creating new concurrent enrollment courses so that we can sort of expand our offerings. We're also going to talk about a transfer agreement that sort of exists between higher education institutions within the state of Utah. And to do that, to introduce you to these processes and this concept, this transfer agreement, I'm going to introduce you to Cyd Grua at the Utah System of Higher Education, who's going to talk a little bit about how this all functions. So, enough of me speaking. With that said, let's go ahead and jump over and introduce you to Cyd Grua. So the first question that I have, the idea behind concurrent enrollment is that students are getting both high school credit and they're getting college credit. So there are two sets of standards that need to be met. And one of the ways that Utah has addressed ensuring that both the college standard is met and the high school standard is met is through the course alignment process. So Cyd, I'm wondering if you can take a minute and talk to us about how exactly this course alignment process works here in the state of Utah.
I think one of the other unique things about Utah compared to other states is that I sense that, at least where curriculum is concerned, we act more like a partner than we are a supervisor and a subordinate. So we're the institution, here's our curriculum, you will teach it. I mean, and like, let's be logical. If I'm taking a history course, I don't want the kid to get health credit in high school, so we have to have some sort of an alignment. Because we coordinate things at a system level, we've had the opportunity to coordinate that alignment process at the system level also. And so I would say two things about it. One is we have legislative homework assignments, and the legislative assignment said that institutions should focus on courses that are highly transferable, and that translation there is general education, which is far more transferable than things that are required for majors. They also said the courses that we offer need to be part of a certificate or degree program. So if it's not Gen Ed, it's got to be part of a certificate or degree program. For example, I can't think of a really good example on the fly, but we couldn't offer yoga for concurrent enrollment because it's not required. And so it has to be part of that program. And then public ed, at least in the state of Utah, they have, just as all other states do, you've got to take X number of units of high school credit to graduate. They have what they call core or cactus curriculum. And I was always amazed because you look at a syllabus in higher ed, and syllabi 10 years ago, they were like, a couple sentences of what you're going to learn in the class, because you're going to go to the class and the faculty member is going to illuminate that for you. You look at public ed, and they'll have learning outcomes standards for a single course that could go on for 18 pages sometimes. They really go into detail. Now, is it all taught the same way across the state that way? Not necessarily, but that's the roadmap. And so we have our charge to focus on Gen Ed, and everything has to be meaningful. We can't have courses that don't do anything for you. And they have their curriculum. So we developed a process where, I'm assuming, Brandon, you get a phone call from James Taylor at Grant District, and he says, I think we need to have another welding class. We need to have another English class. And you talk amongst yourselves, it's like you're playing poker or something, and you know your classes and they know their graduation requirements, and you come up with a course that should be able to satisfy that demand, that need. We actually had a paper and pencil form, which thank goodness we finally replaced with a database 2 years ago. But an institution of higher learning will provide descriptions of the course, the prefix, the number, the title, how many credits. Is it a Gen Ed? If it's not a Gen Ed, how is it part of a certificate or degree program? Is it required or elective? Are there co-requisites? Are there enrollment conditions, placement tests, that kind of thing? And then we include the description of the course, and then we include things like the learning outcomes. So basically, it's almost like the best college syllabus you've ever seen in your life. And then, because we've already had this conversation with our partners in public ed, you look at that lengthy document that they produced in public ed that says, if it's English 11, 12, here's what you need to do: reading, writing, listening. And And we have this fabulous box that says, here's what public ed has to teach, and here's how we meet that requirement, and we're meeting in the middle. We are not dumbing down our curriculum. We are not teaching their curriculum. We're just demonstrating that we're covering the same material, albeit in greater depth and greater scope and greater complexity in college. And there's only one additional, and it's a negotiation, and it's a good one. And what happens is it starts local and ultimately gets submitted through this online database to specialists at our system office for public ed, the State Board of Ed, and they're the experts that know the curriculum. Every once in a while, they'll come back and say, no, I think it should be this other alignment, but I think 99% of the time, they agree with what the local discussion was about how those courses should align. We do have one extra rule, and that is if it's a core class required for high school graduation, like Language Arts 12 or history, U.S. history, because you've got to take 3.5 units of social studies. There has to be an overlap of at least 90%. So using history as an example, a social studies specialist at the State Board of Ed sometimes accuses higher ed of being a couch potato. Because he says in one semester, you cover 500 more years of history than we cover in an entire year. And so we have these kind of conversations, but if it's a core high school graduation requirement, his job is to make sure we cover all those years. And some institutions do it by offering the class for a little longer. I know you've done some major work at Salt Lake Community College to line our core history 1700 up with their curriculum standards. But we've ensured that a kid's taking an English course is going to earn English credit in the high school, and if they're taking a social studies course, a history course, they're going to earn social studies courses in the high school. I don't think it's painful, but as the CE director, Brandon, you might disagree, because it is some work. But the conversations that happen between the districts and the institutions, between faculty and our campus, it also probably helps to ensure rigor of what actually happens when the course is delivered to students.
So one of the great dilemmas, I mean, not just here in Utah, but nationwide, is this issue of course transferability. So, students will ask, is my credit that I take through concurrent enrollment through Salt Lake Community College going to transfer to, the University of Utah? Is it going to transfer to Yale or wherever? But it seems like here in Utah, we've come up with a pretty slick system to ensure transferability, at least to the public institutions here within the state of Utah. So I'm wondering if you can maybe talk a little bit to this issue of course transferability and sort of how we've addressed that, at least here in Utah.
I think we're not unique in this, but I think we might be a couple of years ahead of the curve. We had some legislative homework assignments in that area also. One of them was 20 years ago, they said, all credit transfers. Which, if you're involved in credit transfer, it's not that the credit transfers, it's how it's applied to a degree that you're going to work on when you transfer. So about, 12 or 13 years ago, the legislature gave us a homework assignment to come up with common course numbering. And we have in our state, I want to say 41 what's called majors committees: English, chemistry, physics, mathematics, art. And these majors committees are made up of faculty, and one of their primary goals is to talk about their curriculum, because the common course numbering homework assignment said, if you name a course Art 1010 and everyone on the majors committee agrees that they're teaching about the same thing, that you will transfer Art 1010 as equivalent credit. Equivalent credit meaning as if I took the class in the institution where I'm transferring. And I want to say there are either 800 or 900 courses now that are on these majors committees grids that are common course numbered courses. And the understanding is if it's on the grid, it transfers as equivalent. And in concurrent enrollment, what we've done since 2008-9 is we've promoted not only Gen Ed, but Gen Ed courses that are on that grid that transfer equivalent across the system. English 1010, English 2010, Art 1010, History 1700, our American Institutions history course. And this is a good thing for students because across the system, and it varies from one institution to the next, up to 2/3 of the students that took concurrent enrollment from your institution are going to go to college somewhere else. I mean, they're captive for you because they're in your local high school, but maybe they want to go study agriculture in the opposite end of the state. So it kind of behooves us to ensure transfer. So maybe it's because we started that conversation about all credit transfers and majors, communities, and common course numbering. It's got to be almost 15 or 20 years ago. But I think we're pretty good. We even have advising documents at the system level, and I think the institutions have them too, that give kids a roadmap and say, if you're going to transfer here, take this art class or this psych class. But I think we have concurrent transfer in our hearts and we have it down.
That's fantastic. So I've got just one last question here for you, and that is for those out there across the nation who are maybe watching this and they say, "Oh, that's really interesting. I'd love to explore something like this for my state." What advice would you give them if they are interested in exploring this sort of course alignment process, or developing these sort of transfer agreements within their state? What are some things that maybe they need to be aware of, problems that they need to watch out for and avoid, things that they need to think about, that sort of thing?
Here's the first thing that comes to my mind. It is okay for faculty from a post-secondary institution to have a conversation with educators from a secondary institution about the scope of curriculum. You are not going to dilute your curriculum. You're not going to dummy it down. You're not going to make it easier for those students. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity to network with folks, because I think we've had some faculty who think the alignment process is going to cause them to compromise. Not, absolutely not cause them to compromise. We're offering college credit for college courses to students in high schools, but to the extent that you and understand that you have 51% of that real estate, I suppose, and that you're having that conversation, it's a good one to have. So don't think that it's going to cause you to change what you're doing, unless you decide you want to. Here's a stupid example: introduction to film. You cannot require a high school student in Utah to watch an R-rated film. It can be optional, but you can't require it. And if you think that you can't teach your course without requiring them to watch a certain film, then you can choose not to offer it for concurrent enrollment. So it can be an eye-opener, but you're not going to change your curriculum. I think also, when we're doing this at the system level, I get the sense that in a lot of other states, it's a individual institution of higher learning partnering with some local high schools. So they may not have state standards, but they have probably more documentation on what's going to be covered in their high school class than you have in your college class, because they're having to deal with parents of minor students, and they have to explain everything they're going to cover in that class to those parents. And so this alignment process is an opportunity for you to tell them how you want them to teach your class and what they need to teach, and for them to be able to say, is this okay? And if we have extra time, can we do this and the other thing? It's a learning experience for them, and it'll help them with their kids. Help them with their kids transition to college. So I guess what I'm saying is it won't affect how we're teaching our courses unless we wanted to. And it's an opportunity to network with people who are going to be putting students in your classes and sometimes perhaps teaching them. So that's a good thing. And it can happen with one institution partnering with 3 high schools. It doesn't have to be a state level activity. Just have a cup of Joe, or a Diet Coke, as the case may be. But I think it's an excellent opportunity to have conversations with the people that are going to be sending you their students.
That's awesome. Any final words of advice you'd like to share here with the group before we wrap it up?
I remember, the transfer agreements. Transfer is a national conversation. In the Utah system, we have a transfer platform that we license from a vendor for all 8 of our institutions, and transfer is hard, but transfer is important and necessary, especially now as we have so many institutions working with what they're now calling remote instruction instead of fully online or interactive video conferencing. And we have people that are going to be maybe picking and choosing to take courses from multiple institutions because they're sitting in front of their computer and that, I think that the pandemic that we experienced in the spring and summer of 2020, and we're still experiencing, it's kind of affecting people's perspectives on what they're going to do with college. And so transfer is incredibly hard. Focus on gen ed. If you're going to do CTE, focus on foundational entry level career and technical education courses. And with regard to curriculum alignment, I think that Utah has a proud tradition of acting like a partner with public ed. Public and higher ed should be partners meeting in the middle of the road for concurrent for all manner of reasons. And I think the alignment process is just one other opportunity to do that. I remember when we presented the alignment process at a conference, an NACEP conference in Salt Lake, not the last one, but it had to be 10 or 11 years ago, Brandon. And people came into the session, and a former CE director who was a NACEP president, Ted Ungrich, and I presented on it. And people looked at us like that we were nuts. What were we thinking of doing? And truth of the matter is, I can't think of any other way to do it than to say, let's talk about what we're going to do with these kids while they're in a concurrent classroom and what they're going to learn and experience. So if you think we're nuts, try it before you diss it. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, now before we wrap it up here, I wanted to just take a few minutes and actually walk you through sort of the nitty-gritty details of how this course alignment process works. I'm going to show you the form, and I'm going to sort of walk through how we use that form, where we submit it, and all that sort of information, so you have a real good idea of the course alignment process here in the state of Utah. First of all, for a concurrent enrollment class to exist, there must be an existing high school course and an existing college course that align at least 90% at the curriculum level. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is that the deadline for creating new concurrent enrollment courses is November 15th each year for the upcoming academic year. So if I submit a course November 15th of 2020, then that course isn't going to be available for students to take until the 2021-2022 academic year. So you need to think ahead on these. You can't just submit a course and then have it approved within a few weeks. It takes a little while for this to get approved and to be official. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin this journey through the course alignment process by going to the state master list. I'm going to show you a bit of a roundabout way to get there, because it seems like every year the state tends to change the website and the URL, so the link that I show you ends up being bad. So we've just put a link here on the concurrent enrollment website so that you can always know you can go here and find whatever the current link is. So go to slcc.edu/concurrent enrollment, scroll down to the high school partners section, and then you'll scroll down on the left hand side and you'll see a link called adding new courses to the list. Right here at the top of this page, you'll see a link to the state CE master list. You also see a link to the course offerings and instructor requirements. Course offerings and instructor requirements is basically a copy of the master list for just Salt Lake Community College, and then we've added on top of that the instructor requirements for each course and a little bit of additional information. So we're going to start on the state master list. This is the official list of all the classes that have been approved to be offered through concurrent enrollment at all of the Utah System of Higher Education institutions. So you can see right at the top, we've got Dixie State University, and they offer Accounting 1010. Title of that course is Applied Business Accounting. And here we have the high school information for the high school course that this Accounting 1010 aligns to. So you got the 13-digit core code and then the core title. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that just because Dixie offers Accounting 1010 doesn't mean that by default Salt Lake Community College can also offer Accounting 1010. We too have to go through the alignment process. So if we don't currently offer Accounting 1010, we need to find the college syllabus and CCO, and we need to find the high school Strands and Standards for this high school Accounting 1 CE course, and then we'll have to submit the alignment form in order to get that approved for Salt Lake Community College. So this is institution unique. So now, like I said, in order to fill out the form, there are two things that you need. And I'm going to jump over here and show you what it is I'm talking about. So I'm going to jump into Acrobat. This is a copy of high school Strands and Standards, and this is similar to, at the college, we have what we call the Course Curriculum Outline, or CCO. So in the high school, they call them Strands and Standards, and this is what it looks like. So if you scroll down, first you see the course description up top, some course information, and then we have the Strands and Standards, which are similar to learning outcomes or learning objectives at the college level. So we have a strand, which is sort of the overarching learning outcome, and then we have the details of that in the standards. So each strand may have between 1 and 5 or 10 standards. On the college side, we have the syllabus. So you've got all of the syllabus information, and typically you'll have the learning outcomes listed along with other information like assessments and that sort of thing. You need to know that information before you fill out the form, and you need access to those two documents for the courses you are attempting to align. Once you've got that information, you can come back here to the Concurrent Enrollment website, scroll down, and you see a link to download the alignment form. So you'll download that form and open it in Word. Now, this is not necessarily the official form that's submitted. This form allows you to gather information for the Concurrent Enrollment Director, who will later submit that information through an electronic form. So I'm going to walk through this form and the information that you need to gather and provide for the director to submit to the state so that the specialist, the curriculum specialist in that area, can review it and decide whether it will be approved as a concurrent enrollment class. So first you'll enter the sponsoring institution, the credit hours that are earned through that course, how many of those, the course prerequisite, and the title, which you can find on the syllabus. So there is the course what do they call that? Course prefix and number, and here's the title. So you get that information. Next, you'll come down and select what gen ed code it counts for, if it counts for a gen ed code. It may or it may not. You've got all of the core codes, the state core codes, and then you've got the unique institution requirements. If it doesn't count for gen ed credit, that's okay. So you can come down here and then say, are there any prerequisite requirements? So for example, if this is a 2010 class, is there a 1010 class that is required prior to taking this class? Or is there a co-requisite? You'll put that information there. The delivery method, in most cases it's going to be face-to-face, but if you are willing to have this class taught through other modalities, you're welcome to check those here. This information that we've looked at so far is typically filled out by the higher ed side. Down here, the award name so you've got the award type, the award name, what is this, an associate's in whatever the associates might be. So does this class count towards major preparation? Is it core credit for the major? Is it a prerequisite credit? Is it elective credit? Does it count towards a certificate of proficiency of completion, an associate's of applied science, an associate of science? Check what it applies towards. If it applies towards nothing and it doesn't count towards gen ed, the likelihood of it being approved is virtually non-existent. So we need to select concurrent enrollment classes that count towards a major and count towards a degree. So check what it fulfills and move on. When's the first term that you think it'll be offered? Most likely it's going to be fall of the next year after November 15th. Here you'll copy and paste the course description, which is typically the description you find in the college catalog, and it's likely to be included on the course syllabus. So here's the course description we would copy. Any enrollment conditions. Are there any special conditions that students must fulfill to enroll in this course? You can list those here. Public ed information. You can get this information off of the, let's move back over here, off of the Strands and Standards. So right here is the 13-digit code and other information. If you don't feel comfortable filling this out, then reach out to the Concurrent Enrollment Director. Where in the world am I? Here we go. Reach out to the Concurrent Enrollment Director, and the director will be able to help you with this information. Specialist review, is this a new class? Likely it's a new class. Sometimes specialists at the state require a review because the high school has changed Strands and Standards, or they just haven't looked at it for a long time. That may be the case. The director should know this information. Now we get into the detailed course information, which comes off of the college syllabus. So again, you're going to copy the course description. It's a bit redundant from up there, but put the course description again. Any learning outcomes, which here on this course, Let's see, let's go into the college syllabus. So here we've got the learning outcomes. I would copy and paste those into this field. The learning assessments, this is important as well. How are students assessed? Are they assessed through a test, through exam, through assignments? That information should also be included on the syllabus somewhere here, on how they are, here we go, not the grade scale. Anyway, you can look through, oh, here we go. So this is a summary of how many points and what the students are graded on. So you'll copy and paste that information in the assessments. The lecture schedule, if that exists, you'll paste there. And any additional information that you feel you need to describe sort of the scope and the depth of the course. Now we get into the really probably the most important part of this form, and that is the higher ed, public ed curriculum match information. On this side, we're going to paste the USBE Strands and Standards. So I'll come over here to the Strands and Standards and copy the first strand and its associated standards. So we can copy that, and you'll go ahead and paste that information right here. And you'll continue doing that for each of the strands and their associated standards. So for example, if there are 5 strands and varying numbers of standards under each of these, then you'll fill out 5 of these boxes. So you don't have to have one standard for each box, but one strand with all of its standards in each box. Once that's done, then the form goes to the higher ed side, and either a faculty member, an associate dean, or someone with the academic expertise will fill in this column. And what they'll do is they'll go into each cell, read the strand and standards, and then over here list how the college or university class meet this standard. So we might read through this and say, oh, well, in interior design 1010, this is what we do to cover this information. You go ahead and do that for each of the strands and standards, and then once that's done, the form is filled out. Now, if you're going through and you say, well, we really don't cover anything in this strand or its standards in the college class. In fact, this one strand and standard is its own class in itself, and we go into enormous detail. If that's the case, just leave this blank. Don't worry about it. Now, if you go through and you're like, well, none of these really align, we don't cover any of this stuff in our college class, then the likelihood that this is going to be approved as a concurrent enrollment class is basically non-existent. So once that's done, you'll go ahead and send that information off to the concurrent enrollment director completed, and the director will then come over to this website, the concurrent enrollment master list submission site, will log in and go in to create a new course submission where they will copy and paste all of the information from the form that you've submitted. Once that information has been filled into this form, the form will be submitted, and then we stand by and we wait for the curriculum specialist at the state office to review it and make the determination whether the high school course and the college course are a 90% match or whether they're not. If they are, the director gets a notification that says this course has been approved, and then the director will reach out to all the parties that have been involved in creating this course and let them know that it's been approved and it will be offered for the next year. He'll also send out a notice to all the high schools so that if they're interested in applying to teach the class, they can do so. If it's not approved, the director will also notify all of the partners and the stakeholders who have been helping to create this course and let them know that unfortunately it didn't go through. And that is the process for creating a new concurrent enrollment course. All right, well, hopefully that's got the juices flowing. Hopefully you've got some great ideas now of some things that maybe you can try and implement in your own program or state for creating new concurrent enrollment classes and coming up with these articulation agreements so that the credit that the students earn at your institution transfers seamlessly, at least within the state. Sometimes we have no control outside of the state. Sometimes we don't even have control within the state. But hopefully that gives you some ideas of things that you might start exploring to see if you can create a better experience and a better product overall for the students in the end. Until the next episode, remember again that nothing is impossible if you're resourceful, if you think outside that box, and if you have the courage to act.